This personal story is one that caused me to question my love for the outdoors. What I saw out there still haunts me. I can sometimes still see that thing with its twisted grin and cackling chuckle. I feel like the only way to escape its memory is to share it, so I'm not the only one burdened with this. Well, to start off, I loved the outdoors all through my childhood, and when I had a chance to visit the Rocky Mountains during the summer of my sophomore year in college with my friend Jack, I jumped at the opportunity. He had some pretty wealthy parents, so he spent every summer traveling the world going on backpacking trips. He went on trails I could only dream to hike. He knew that I also loved to backpack, so he offered to pay for me to come along with him, knowing that there was no way I'd be able to pay for myself. This was a dream come true for me because I had always wanted to backpack the Rockies. About a week away from the start of the trip, Jack calls with some bad news. His girlfriend got in a minor car accident and he's going to have to miss the trip. He did, however, say that I could go by myself if I still wanted to. My natural instincts told me that it's stupid to go in the woods alone, especially in an unfamiliar territory, but this opportunity was way too big to pass up. And so I went without him, and I started off on the trailhead alone. In the days prior to my arrival, it had rained a lot in the upper mountains, so I fastened on my rain gear and headed off along the trail. A few days later, I found myself lonely and wishing that my friend was there with me. The trip was supposed to last 2 full weeks, and I wanted to go home after 5 days, even though it was a dream trip. I only saw 3 other people along the trail, and they were going in the opposite direction of me. I was thinking about calling it quits at a small town that was about 40 miles on the trail. Sure, I was seeing beautiful sights, but what was the point if I had no one to share it with? So I wanted to get the 40 miles over with, so I continued to walk as the sun went down. It only took a few minutes for the darkness to creep up, but I was determined to get home and continued my journey with a headlamp. At that point, I figured I made a stupid mistake with trying to get a little further during the night because now I was submerged in darkness. So I stopped where I was and walked only 5 feet from the trail to set up my tent. I was supposed to camp a minimum of 50 feet off the main trail, but it was so dark that I decided to break that rule just for tonight. I set up my tent and laid down on my bed mat while hiding my face in the sleeping bag, and then slowly drifted off to sleep, listening to the sounds of nature that surrounded me. Later on, the night turned to a cold and crisp breeze. I heard a rustling coming from the outside of the tent and thought it was nothing. But then I felt the tent shake a little and heard heavy breathing with snorts. The hairs in the back of my neck stood up and shivers ran up and down my spine. I tried to be as still as I possibly could so I wouldn't draw any attention to myself. Then I heard nothing, like the world stopped turning, and out of nowhere the tent was slit open. I tried to get out of my sleeping bag, but whatever it was that ripped the tent was on top of me. I felt my bones on the brink of breaking due to a large weight. There was one large paw on top of my back, and the claws were slightly drawing blood from where they rested. I stayed as still as a rock because my life depended on it. Whatever it was on top of me finally got off, but never completely left the area. I finally gathered enough courage that I peeked my head through the top of the sleeping bag and looked at the destroyed remnants of my tent. I heard the footsteps and looked, and beheld a gigantic grizzly bear that had its face in my bag looking for food. Wow, I forgot to tie my bag in the tree to keep bears and other animals from reaching it. I guess I was just so tired that I forgot, and now that simple mistake may be the cause of my death. I knew not to move a muscle or look the bear in the eyes, so I just stayed in my sleeping bag and demolished tent for the rest of the night, undetected by the bear. The sun finally dawned over the mountains, and I had stayed up all night terrified. I finally shook out of the trance I was in and saw that the bear had moved on. My heart soared and I felt like a great burden was lifted off my back. But then I remembered my destroyed backpack and my heart sunk. I got up and examined the damage. My bag was torn and supplies were scattered everywhere. I saw all of my snacks were gone and only crumbs with ripped wrappers were left. I did, however, rejoice when I saw that my water purifier was unbroken, so at least I would have clean water. I thought to myself that I may have survived the bear encounter, but without food or most of my supplies, I would be lucky if I would be able to last 3 more days. So, there I was in the middle of the woods with no tent, no food, and really no hope. The backpacking trail was so long and rocky that most backpackers avoided it, so getting help from other backpackers along the trail was very slim. Plus, even if you did run into other people, they probably couldn't spare much because you're supposed to only carry the bare minimum. So I knew I was in trouble. I tried to scavenge what I could and fasten my backpack together with some chewed-on twine. I quickly got back onto the trail where I looked all around for campfire smoke or backpackers or just anything, and there was nothing to be seen. I gave up and just continued along the trail with my head hung low. A few minutes later, there were footsteps coming from up the trail and my hope soared. I ran to where the sounds were coming from, but to my amazement, there was no one there. So I turned around and began to walk, but then noticed a slim, pale man standing on the trail only 10 yards away. I was surprised on how he snuck up on me, but I didn't care now because now I had hope. I started to talk excitedly while walking towards him, saying, I was attacked by a bear and lost all my food and some supplies, and I was wondering if I could... I stopped mid-sentence. My insides seemed to twist with a sickening feeling, and I felt that something was off about him. The man just stood there looking at me for a moment and then answered in a low-toned, scratchy voice. My cabin is just down this hill next to the river. If you follow me, I can show you. I had mixed feelings about following him, but I had no other choice, so I overruled my better judgment and followed. As we went down, the sky dimmed to darkness as if it was night. We went far off the trail, and I felt my legs fall numb. I didn't have time to think, as we were already at the bottom of the hill. The man stopped walking, and his head snapped 180 degrees, which put him face to face with me, and he stated poetically in a mangled voice, "The sky is night, though it is supposed to be bright, and the fear I feel draws me near. You can't run nor hide, so give up your pride, and I shall blow away your strife by taking your life." As soon as I heard this, I broke out into a straight sprint for the hill, but as I tried to climb it, the rock and dirt turned to brittle sand. The hill became steeper, and I could not climb it without sliding back down because the fine sand provided no grip. I heard the man say again from the poem, "And the fear I can feel draws me near." He had a smile on his face that was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was of pure evil. I darted towards the river, but it suddenly overflowed with muddy water, making it impossible to cross without drowning. I kept hearing that twisted poem replay in my mind. I backed away from the river, and I felt my shoulder bump into something, which caused me to turn around swiftly, and I turned to see the man standing right behind me. I asked him with my body trembling, "Who are you? What is going on?" The man smiled as he disappeared in a pile of dust that scattered in the cold, uneven wind. I looked around, wondering where the man had left to, and knew I couldn't escape because whatever I tried was blocked off. So I gave up and curled up in a ball. I could hear the man's cackling chuckle, and it echoed in my ears like the sound of a gunshot. It was like he was everywhere, but nowhere all at once. I stood up on my feet and was struck to the ground with a hard blow to the chest. I tried to get up again, but the same thing happened, with much more force, knocking the wind out of my chest. Soon I could feel a burning sensation all over my body. I tried to scream out, but no matter how hard I tried, nothing came out, as if the thing had stolen the air from my lungs. I felt my ribs being squeezed and the air was being forced out of my body. A ring of fire formed around me, and the man appeared again. His eyes were red now, and his neck had markings on it that could only be formed from the fibers of a rope. He pulled out a rope and fastened a knot into it right before he tossed it onto the ground. And then he snapped his fingers, and the rope immediately strung up on a tree that towered over me. "All of this can end. All it takes is one little ride," he said, while gesturing at the rope that dangled above. My face scrunched as I yelled, "I will not kill myself because of you." "Oh, in that case, these next days will be quite an experience," the devilish man answered back. I thought back to the poem the man had sung and recalled the words, and the fear I can feel draws me near. Maybe if I didn't show any fear, the man would lose his power over me somehow, so I began to stand the same way a bear would stand to protect her cubs. I cleared my thoughts. The man saw this and said while cackling, "You thought back onto the poem, I see." The man's tone intensified as he continued, "You are a smart one, so it will be fun to break you. You will fall like all the others before you." The man lifted his hands, which were now turning a reddish color to the darkened sky, where now there were trees full of hanging bodies. They swayed in the wind and were so close to each other that they would continually bump one another. I did not flinch a muscle because I was going to live through this to see my family and my friends again. The man began to talk with a smirk on his face. "You're not scared of this? All of these hanging bodies are the ones who came before you. They are all mine now, and don't you think it's quite an impressive collection?" The devilish man looked up at the bodies and continued, "I did not kill a single one of them, but simply pushed them to the breaking point, the same way I am going to push you." I broke the man's endless taunting. "I will not let you get into my head and make me kill myself." The sky lightened a little bit, and the man's powers seemed to dwindle down. "You're fighting the fear which I impose upon you. You might be strong, but not strong enough for this." The man screeched with a raspy voice as he seemed to glide through the air towards me, and the wind quickened. His hands were outstretched, and his skin began to peel off, revealing a black monster of indescribable hideousness. The flakes of his skin were picked up by the wind and turned to flames. "Do you fear me now?" The monster screamed, stopping only inches from my face. I held back the feelings of fear that so desperately wanted to come prying out. "I'm not scared of you anymore," I stated firmly while directly staring into the creature's dead eyes. The beast grew into a rage, but then calmed down to where it bowed its head and backed away from me, turning into black ashes, leaving only the sound of his cackle. As soon as this happened, I fell to the dirt unconscious. I awoke in my tent with sweat covering my entire body and a nasty headache. I looked around and saw that I had all of my food and my gear. I said to myself with a sigh of relief, "It was all a bad dream. That thing I saw doesn't and couldn't possibly exist." I packed my stuff but could not get the dream out of my head. When I was all ready to go, I started back on the backpacking trail. Soon I came to the place in my dream where I met the man. It was strange. I had never seen this part of the trail before, but it matched the trail in my dream exactly. I shrugged it off as coincidence and thought that maybe I had passed that part before and continued to walk, but my eyes wandered down to the place where I found the man off the trail. It was then that I saw something that chilled me straight down to my very core. In the distance, I saw the exact same man from my dream, dead, hanging from a tree.